Swallow me, swallow me, drip down the side of me. Hoes in this house. There's some hoes. Anyway, let's just talk about how book clubs can be, you know, your own little support group.
We are going to go through the 12 books we read. We're going to tell you which ones were bad.
I would rather cut off my toes one at a time than finish this book.
We love you so much, Sarah, but that was your pick.
And she knows she did us dirty.
You know you did us dirty. Deprived. Yeah, dead. Deprived of any life. How did he survive? I don't like to think about death.
Really?
And so, I know. I don't think actually being dead is very terrifying to me.
It sounds like a great nap. Well, now I just want to have like a full-on death conversation with my sister.
If it does not hook ya, I don't think we have similar taste. Except for Grace, who DNF'd it. And you know what?
We
bless
celebrate
her for that. We
yes.
bless her for knowing her own taste.
We love her journey. When I tell you, if I want to take down a book in a day and do a puzzle, this is the type of book I want. We're Chris and Mads, sisters who love a good story.
The only thing better than experiencing a good story is talking about it.
We're here for the unfiltered, unhinged conversations with fellow story lovers and storytellers.
And the occasional rant or rave about the shit that rips our hearts out and puts us back together again.
The stuff that makes us laugh till we pee our pants.
And the ones that teach us what it is to be human. Welcome to the sisterhood.
Welcome to the show, you guys. Today we have a very fun episode where we are going to go through the 12 books we read with our In Real Life book club in 2024. We're going to tell you which ones were bad, good, and best, according to us. Maybe we'll put in some of the opinions of our fellow book clubbers. And hopefully this gives you some ideas for your book clubs or books you would like to read and maybe buddy read with somebody else. If you are new to the show and you are listening to this in a place where you can easily rate and review us, we would love you forever and give you so many forehead kisses. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do there as well. We love it when you subscribe. We love when you come back and comment.
What an intro, Maddie.
Thank you. I'm working on my skills.
I was going back over this last year's book club books, and I kind of like forgot about some of them. So it's interesting when
Were they the bad ones though?
Well, yes. Obviously they were the ones that weren't that great. But looking back, do you ever just want to re-rate books? Because you're like, actually, maybe I was too kind. Looking back, that was not even what I gave it.
I think I go back and forth both ways. Like, ooh, that one's sticking with me. Should have rated it higher.
Yes.
And then there's ones that I'm like, oh no, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Not that this episode is really about rating, but going back, I'm like, in the moment, I think I might have had a little bit of a, we're going to meet with the girls. I don't want to upset the person who picked this book.
Yes. We do need to be honest about that. Like when you group read with someone or with a group, like you don't want to come in hot and heavy with like a super negative opinion, especially if you're not the one who picked the book and someone else picked it. So,
or the other way, right? What you love a book and everybody else is poo-pooing on it. And you're like, oh yeah, maybe it was actually shite.
Well, we're going to get into all of that because I remember
we know you do,
which of these were like hits and misses and which like divided our group. So we want to give you some context. We have an In Real Life club with our younger sister, Grace, who probably reads, I would say, like around 30 books a year. And she's in corporate America. She loves business books. And she's kind of recently on the romantasy train. But she grew up, reading fantasy and sci-fi with our family.
Yeah.
So she comes from a similar background. But I would say her taste is a little bit different to even like Kristen and I. And then we also have our friend Sarah, who is an indie bookstore owner locally. She owns Fern and Fable, and she reads such a variety. She comes with the best recs that are totally out of left field, and we never would have picked them up if it wasn't for her.
Oh, Sarah, we love you. She also doesn't miss a post that we make, even though I work out with her like 5 days a week and we talk about books while we're working out. This girl could talk about books all day. She is a girl after our own hearts.
Yes.
So she's great to have in the book club.
And then Emily.
And then Emily is actually my college roommate who does live local where we are, but is currently in California because her husband is stationed there for a year and a half. So she's been meeting with us virtually.
Yeah, Emily is a real one. She is a long distance champ in the book club. And I would say Emily's taste is she really leans towards personal development, practical books. And so she she'll do a fiction for us here and there, but her heart is truly in like personal development, growth, and spiritual books. So she brings that flavor to our group. And so I think you're going to see a lot of fun variety in this list. You're going to be like, whoa, what do any of those books have in common? Us, our In Real Life Book Club. That's what they have in common.
It's good for us, too, because when you're with a group with that kind of variety, you are going to also create more variety in your reading, which is really, really good for staying out of slumps, finding new authors, and finding genres that you might not have found. So you're going to see how we stepped out this year. I think we should just, leave the best ones for the end. And let's start with the ones that were like, we probably wouldn't recommend for your book club or maybe even for your reading enjoyment. We'll tell you if there's good points, we will share those. If we can find them, we will share them. But how about we just start with the one that I DNF'd because I have nothing to say?
Yes, Kristen. Would you like to talk about...
I have nothing to say. It was horrible.
All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks.
I think I got an hour and a half into the audio and I was like, I would rather cut off my toes one at a time than finish this book.
Wow.
And I was listening to it at like the most speed I can listen to it at without getting a migraine. I couldn't do it. Like, I was repulsed by her vision of the world.
So this is really difficult because actually one of my friends really loves this book. And, but I'll just say our entire club was not a fan. So if your taste resonates with any of ours, I don't know that you'll like it. Here was the issue with All About Love, New Visions. It was repetitive. It was boring, but basically it was mostly opinion without substance, and I didn't agree with a lot of the opinions, and they were stated very boldly and forcefully, like, this is the way it is. This is how it would be better.
Said, no, bitch, it isn't.
It wasn't like, here's my experience and my memoir, take from it what you will, here's what I've learned, kind of like a green light situation with Matthew McConaughey. No, this was just like, this is the way it should be. This is the way the world needs to go, according to me, period. And I was just like, actually, no.
And I have a hard time DNFing. When I tell you it was a full body, soul, mind, fuck no, that's what
was. I think that I appreciated the intent behind it, which is why I gave it 2 stars. Like the title of the book, All About Love, New Visions. I appreciated the title. I appreciated the blurb. I appreciated that she was trying to say that the way to move forward as individuals, as a collective, as a society is with love over power in the forefront. And I can get that premise, but that's a bumper sticker, and there's a lot of nuance and delicacy that needs to be explored if you're going to try to make that like your way of life. You don't demonize power altogether. Like actually the way to move in the world as a loving human being is to be empowered. So you cannot demonize power. Anyway, we don't need to get into the specifics, but we do not recommend. Bad time. It was a bad time.
Yeah, I don't even like talking about these books because I love to just talk about things that we love. And I start talking about these ones and I'm like, the world is ending.
And also, if you have read this book and it was empowering to you or it was inspiring to you as it was to one of our friends, we love this for you. This was just our experience with a group of 5. So maybe this is one that if it's interesting to you specifically, check it out, but maybe don't read it with a book club.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we're your people if you liked that book, but that's just, I don't know, man. I don't know about, let's just move on.
Yeah, that was
not a slay.
We love you so much, Sarah, but that was your pick.
And she knows she did us dirty.
You know you did us dirty, and we love you anyways. And it is a safe space in the book club for you to recommend bad books.
And you know what? Sometimes I recommend books that aren't great.
For sure.
I have done this before, so like none of us were well, we kind of playfully dogged on her at club, like why?
But we can take
ever living hell.
We can take as good as we get. Like if we, I mean, I recommended a book that we'll talk about later that our sister Grace DNF'd. So that's how it goes. But
it's all right.
Kristen and I and the whole club were in alignment about that one. Okay, Kristen, talk to us about Butcher and Blackbird.
Okay. Butcher and Blackbird is a love story. So like it's a rom-com, but it's about 2 serial killers. So the premise actually sounded so fun. We did it in October. It was like going to be kind of like our spooky, dark type book. So we were looking for the theming, and I was like, oh my gosh, everybody loves this. And everybody was on board to read it. However, when we got into it, it just felt so formulaic, like so many of the contemporary romances today. Was the smut good? Okay, the smut was crazy. I remember reading it and being like, okay, props to you for being creative in this area. But I was genuinely really freaking grossed out at some parts, which is like the horror scene. It's just not for me. And I was pretty bored. I just did it in a day while doing a puzzle, so my stakes were really low. But I don't know really who I would recommend it to. And so that's why this is not like a hit for me. It's because it's just not something that I really want to put my name behind. And I think the people who it's for will find it because they'll follow people who like that stuff.
I do think I understand who it's for. And I think I understand why it's successful. I think it's a silly, easy read that no one's taking too seriously. And it's fun and it's spicy.
Yeah.
I think that people who love like the Dexter show and stuff, like this will be right up your alley. I just think it really comes down to this is not our taste.
Yes.
At all. And I would say that the best rating from the group was like a 3.5.
And I think that was me. Like some of the banter was really funny and I laughed out loud sometimes. And the spice, as far as spice goes, some of it was, I would say, very well done. But I don't read for really good smut, and I've read better banter. Like it wasn't like groundbreaking. So
I think people also just really love that audiobook, but then there was some controversy around one of the narrators. So
yeah, I
think it's just like one of the best parts of it was the narration, and that's not tainted. So I don't, yeah. Anyways, no. Butcher and Blackbird is by Brynn Weaver.
That's right.
And it just wasn't a hit for us, but I don't know if universally it wouldn't be a hit for book clubs. I just think our club specifically didn't get into it that much.
It was really funny when we all got together. So Leather and Lark, I believe, is the next one.
That sounds correct.
And I don't know, like catch me possibly picking it up someday. Like, wait, I don't know.
Are you serious? What makes you think it's going to be any different?
I hate feeling like it's unfinished.
Oh.
And I'm like, it wasn't so bad that I couldn't power through, but I don't know. This is the reading journey I'm on right now. I need to set some boundaries, obviously. I'm like, it's not that toxic for me, Kristen.
Dude, I understand
not
DNFing a book, but you can definitely DNF series. You actually need to. I think this is for your mental health. Okay. We have one more bad time.
Oh, this is going to be
and we have been stalling because we don't want to poo-poo this or yuck anyone's yum.
I think you should yuck it first because I can give a little yum.
We're just being honest. For our group, Powerless by Lauren Roberts was not a good time. I think, honestly, the main two reasons are not even like negative for everyone. They're just negative for us. The main two reasons are that it was bloated. It just had too many words. It was too long for the YA novel that it is. And it was too reminiscent of other things we've read that are better. So for those reasons, it just was like disappointing. And then I think depending on taste, there was just some of us that just were getting the ick from it pretty bad. So anyway, we're so sorry.
It was actually like, I feel like not that bad for you to say. I'm so proud of you. So here's the deal. I don't like that this book was so pumped up to me that it was going to be this like incredible book. And then I read it and I'm like, did we read the same book? Maybe Book Talk does this. Maybe, I don't know, Bookstagram, whatever it's called. Maybe some books are just inflated.
Sure.
Okay. Also,
we have been known to inflate books, Kristen. We are guilty.
Well, they can.
I think when people really love a book, they're entitled to hype it as hard as they want.
Sure.
And I just think it's up to us to know whether our taste aligns with said person.
Yes. So, like Maddie said, we have just read better things in the genre. And also, Maddie especially, and me a little bit, by the time we read Powerless, which was last winter, we had been pretty burnt out on romantasy. So that means we had read a lot of it. I remember reading it and being like, if this had been my first or second romantasy, this probably would have hit. Like, it was not all bad. Not at all. But I just think if you've read a lot of it, it starts feeling like this formula that everybody just like pumps into a machine. And then they're like, their editors are too nice to them. So they're not like, you need to cut out like 300 pages. And I've only said it every single episode I've ever had on this channel. But earn your pages. Like, longer does not mean better.
100%.
Like, Maddie read a book over this weekend that was how many pages? And she said it was like...
It was under 200 pages, and it is now in my top 5 books of all time.
So let's just talk about that romantasy and let's learn. Let's learn. So I don't think I'm going to move on in the series. I do think Grace was the person who actually enjoyed this book the most, our sister. And she either did go on or is going on in this series. And I'm really excited for people who get excited about that. We just have like a specific type of romantasy that we're really yearning for right now. And that wasn't really giving that.
It wasn't, but I am so glad because we are now done with the bad times and we are moving into good times. Now, there is a best times category, but these, when we're talking good times, we're saying like overall, our group, no one rated it lower than a 3. Like, we're talking 4 to 5 stars.
Oh my
God.
God.
We were having a good time, except for, I guess, the one that Grace DNF'd, which we'll get into.
Which is so interesting. But we'll get to that. So do you want to start with Magnolia Parks?
Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. Who recommended this, Kristen? Did you put this forth?
I want to say it was me, but I think you and I had both had it on our TBRs because there were a few people we followed that were like going through the series at the time.
I think that's true, but we do have to backtrack a second because
Chris?
I have to take full responsibility that I am the one who put forth Powerless into the book club.
Yeah, Maddie.
So,
check yourself before you wreck our book club.
So Magnolia Parks, I think we all had a good time. I probably rated it the lowest, and it was still like a 3.5 star, and I still had a good time. I am an OG Gossip Girl fan, and it definitely was reminiscent of that. I think that Jessa Hastings is a beautiful writer. Mm-hmm. I think she just writes emotion so well. I think it's so evocative and poetic the way she does it without being like super purple in her prose. Like, it's not overly wordy or poetic, but it's just very...
Is that what purple means?
Yeah, it is very
For everybody who doesn't know,
writing.
like people like me, when you say things like that, you might have to explain a little bit.
Okay, well, purple writing is like overly written, overly flowery language. And it's not that, but it is just like beautiful writing and it is addictive. Like, I would say it's the same page count, I think, as Powerless. So it runs long for a contemporary romance, but it doesn't feel super bloated to me. Like, I think it must have very consistent pacing and very addictive narrative. So you're just kind of like hooked the whole time.
I'm going to continue. I did continue to book 2, which is Daisy Hates, where you get a POV of another female main character in a different like love story. I agree the writing is great. I had fun listening to it. My only gripe is, and this is my personal thing, and I would like to know if anybody else in the world is like me, but I don't like reading toxic romances, meaning like people are like not being kind to each other. It's not just like the miscommunication trope. Like, I can handle that. A good person can miscommunicate. But like cheating, repeated addictive behaviors.
Oh, Kristen, this is the brand of the Magnolia Parks universe.
So that's what it is. So I just want you to know that's what it is. And I just have to separate it, but it's hard for me. Like, it doesn't feel like, oh, when they get together, it feels so good. I'm like, it feels tainted as fuck because these people are evil. But I can also see, we're going to talk about another books like this too. It also feels a bit like real life because real life does deal with people having addictive and mean behaviors. And so it does feel a bit like, I remember my best friend went through a relationship just like that, or maybe you personally did. But sometimes that hits a little bit too home. So just be aware. Like, I read for the vibe, and to go back and finish the series, I'm going to do it because I like the vibe. But it is not my favorite type of romance. To me, it's like watching like things happening in Beverly Hills or in the Hamptons and like Gossip Girl, like in the city. It's like, what would wealthy people do and what kind of toxic life would never be touchable for me. But also I actually don't want a part of. I'll just like watch from over here.
Fair. The last thing we want to say about Magnolia Parks is this was a huge hit for our sister Grace and became her favorite series of the year. So I do think that even in a book club, when something is just kind of like mid or good or fun for you, but it ends up being like holy grail for someone else in the group, that is so satisfying. Yeah. And there's another book like that in here that I feel that way about. So I really think my overall experience and enjoyment in the book club is really enhanced when something is like such a hit for someone else.
Yeah, it's almost like we're going on a little treasure hunt together and we get the treasure and I'm like, it's actually not the treasure I wanted, but I'm so happy to see you get this and you to see their joy and you're like, I'm glad I was here for the adventure. Like we did this together.
Yes. And then Blackwell's or somebody came out with that beautiful edition and that's what we got Grace for Christmas. So it was like perfect.
And now I actually want to own the Blackwell's edition myself.
Just because those cloth bounds are so pretty.
But aren't they just the 3 books that have Magnolia?
I think
as the
right
main
now
character?
they're just the Magnolia books, correct?
Yeah, and there's 5.
And I think a 6th book is coming, right?
Whoa, I don't know, but that's overwhelming to me.
Book about Julian might be coming, but
sheesh.
Okay, so we will move on to another good time book, which this was actually mixed vibes.
Yeah.
But we put it in this category because the majority of us liked it, and that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I think that one of the reasons that Grace and Kristen did not have as good a time as Sarah and I, and I'm trying to remember if Emily read this with us or if she was on maternity leave, but Sarah and I remember, did really enjoy Normal People. I think that Grace and Kristen potentially went in expecting maybe like a toxic romance, but still like a romance. And I would say Normal People is absolutely literary fiction.
Yeah.
With a interpersonal relationship and a romantic relationship at the heart of it. But it is absolutely literary fiction. And it's more about awkwardness and people and the trauma cycle and the healing cycle than it is about love. And so that if you're going in looking for the typical formula romance plot, you will not get it. And then you will be disappointed.
So I rated this book 2 stars.
Let's just get that out of the way. Kristen did not have a good time with it at first.
But I actually read before Normal People. I think that one was like on hold at the library or something. So I read her other book, Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I really enjoyed it. Was not a 5-star, but was like a high 3, maybe 4. And so then I was like so excited to go into Normal People because I'm like, Beautiful World, Where Are You is not even like her best writing. Like everybody says Normal People is the best one. It's like Sally Rooney's best work. I'm so excited. And then I got in there and I was like, well, I feel like I've been standing under a rain cloud every time I pick this book up.
I'm
That's
so sorry.
not my favorite emotion. But this is where it gets good. And this is where I want to like help the people out. I actually think that if you did what me and Maddie do on our Patreon, like a page to screen situation with Normal People, I read the book, 2 stars, but I was told by my friends that the show was like unreal and has a really hot guy in it. And I was like, whatever, I'll fuck it up and watch the show. So I watched the show. Okay, so I wanted to go back and rate the book 4 stars after watching the show. Don't know how you can do that, but because together, I think that what was missing for me in the book, I got from the movie, and I liked the background and the extras that you always get from a book that they can't be put on screen. So together, I would say it would actually be a really cool experience. I would just like read and then watch, maybe watch and then read. My friends did say that they liked the show better than the book. I still like the show better than the book.
I just really liked the book, but I think I also had a strong appreciation for the writing style. I think Sally Rooney has a lot of personality and flair to how she writes, but I also think for you felt like the main characters were really unlikable in the book, whereas I think that the show made you sympathetic towards them.
Yeah, well, because when you see people in pain and you read about people in pain, it is very different. Like maybe it's also because I'm a very visual person. So yeah, I feel like I could just connect to them a little bit more.
But we can appreciate that Sally Rooney is not a bloated writer at
No,
all.
no.
She earns her pages every time.
And I'm looking forward to reading more of her work. I think you
Same.
said you just got another one.
I just bought Intermezzo, and I am so excited.
Yeah, I will read more of her work. And I almost want to reread Normal People now that I've watched the show, and I feel like I have an appreciation. It was not what I thought. Like adjusting expectations going into a book, if somebody gives you not great expectations, or if you inflate them like Powerless, it's like it can really mess with your enjoyment of a story.
Sure.
So that's Normal People.
Well, let's move into totally different genre. We did Tuesdays with Morrie, And I believe this was one of my recommendations.
Yeah.
And this is by Mitch Albom. It is a nonfiction. And this was definitely scratching Emily's itch at the time. I was like, okay, let's do a nonfiction for Emily. And I had just gotten Tuesdays with Morrie for my birthday. Tuesdays with Morrie is a book that really dances with the concept of dignity and death. And I think it's a concept that is really uncomfortable for me. I don't like to think about death.
Really?
And so I know. I think that it has something to do with our upbringing and our spiritual worldview when we were children. And I think I had a strong handle as a child on what death and transition were. And I had a lot of peace around losing the people that we lost in our lives. And I think the older I get and the more I become conscious of my own imminent demise, and I think probably becoming a mother altered my perception a little bit. I think that the unknown of it can really get under my skin sometimes, and then just really the unknown of the process of dying. I don't think actually being dead is very terrifying to me.
It sounds like a great nap.
I don't think being dead is terrifying. I think the process of dying, and especially for those who know they are dying, which is many, many people in the human experience, I think that is a very interesting and worthwhile thing to write about. I think that experience of knowing that your days are numbered and knowing how you are going to die and around when is something that can feel really daunting and make you feel very powerless. And so I think finding dignity and choosing how you will go through that experience is just fascinating. And that's exactly what that book is about. And it's told in such a approachable way. So on one hand, I don't think it's anything profound, but on the other hand, I think it's very profound to explore such a everyday experience that I think a lot of people avoid, at least people like me, just like avoid thinking about.
Well, now I just want to have like a full-on death conversation with my sister. I feel like the podcast is not the place for this.
I will give you 30 to 60 seconds if you would like to tell me your worldview on death. Go ahead.
That's not long.
Maybe everybody wants to know what Kristen thinks about death. Kristen obviously does not have a lot of fear around death.
No, I have zero fear around death. Death actually sounds very preferred to me sometimes because life just seems like such a waste of time.
Wow.
Right? Like we're here for fuck what? Like we're just on a giant planet floating through outer space, and I'm just like a grain of sand. I just don't take life very seriously. I don't take life very seriously. Death actually feels like the big seriousness because based off of my beliefs, and I know everybody's are different, is that I am a part of everything, of the collective, and when I die I just go back to being a part of everything. And so I never stop getting to be a part of the experience and the evolution of whatever existence is. But this version of me living where I live with my home and my family and stuff, I know it's nothing to write home about. It just doesn't matter. Like I don't matter. And that gives me peace.
Interesting.
So when I read this book, what I actually found very profound was I thought, wow, how refreshing it would be to know when you're going to die and how you're going to die. So then you can just get shit done that you want to get done. And he did that. He was like, well, I have a finite amount of time. And I have things that are unsaid, things I want to say, things I want to leave, like a legacy. And he just got shit done, which is how much time do we waste in our lives fiddle farting around without intentionality. And I think that was what was so beautiful to me, was that he was just like, well, there's all this stuff out of my control, but in this tiny little section, there is my control. And this is how I'm going to do it. And what he did with just that tiny, look, we have so much more control than Morrie had in our day-to-day lives. We can walk around, we can feed ourselves, we can wipe our own asses after we shit. Like this bro just took his voice and his mind and made something that now will last, I believe, generations past.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been wildly successful for the last 25 years since he passed away. So,
and that to me is like powerful. Like we don't have power and we don't matter, but we can make a big impact with intentionality. That's what I got from it.
I absolutely appreciated that aspect of it, that he was so intentional before he died. And it gave great perspective to, again, what I was talking about, the dignity conversation, that we wrap so much up in our capability, at least in the Western culture. And for him to be dying of ALS, where he loses all control of his body. And
poor baby.
Yeah, that and that his perspective on, if he could do anything, if he could be well for a day, what would he do? And that he would just go swimming and have lunch with his friends and take a walk outside. I mean, it really does give you beautiful. So much appreciation for having the ability to do things that we take for granted. I do, in some ways, I do buy into the idea that we rejoin the collective when we die and that existence is forever. And I do not feel purposeless in the life I have now. I think I do have great, non-Buddhist, but I do have great love and attachment to the life I have built.
That's great.
And I feel very attached to this body and this life.
Aww.
But that's okay. I think even if your life philosophy holds true, and I hope that it does, and I in some ways have a lot of faith in that worldview as well. If I do believe that part of what is beautiful about the life I have now is that it's finite. And so there's a part of like the yin and yang of it that I will just appreciate. I appreciate it even though it is, going to end. I appreciate it because it is going to end.
But you know what endings mean, right?
And endings can be very poetic and beautiful. I think I'm also, just as we get into our kink conversation, which we're going to do next week on our podcast, we're going to talk about our existential kinks. But I think I must have a little kink inside me, a kinky little part of me that likes a little bit of poetic pain and loss to my beauty. And so I think I have an attachment to feeling a little bit apprehensive about death, because I want to feel a little bit scared and worried about losing what I have.
Oh yeah.
It's part of how I love what I have.
I think it says a lot about how much you love your life too. I think that's beautiful, Maddie.
I do love it.
That's lovely.
So that book made us think a lot.
Obviously, we could actually probably do a whole podcast just on our thoughts from this book. So that is definitely a great pick if you're in a book club where there's people who are going to appreciate something that is, nonfiction. It's not very long. It's going to give you a lot to talk about when you get together for your conversation.
I think it's good to read it with a club that, if you guys are willing to go a little bit deeper into everyone's, and have discussions about death, like with your friends or family. Sometimes a book like this is a great jumping off point to just talk about different people's feelings. I do think one person maybe it was our sister Grace, was like, Tuesdays with Morrie was okay. Maybe 3, maybe 4 stars. I mean, I think he got a little preachy at the end.
Yeah. But, what do you need to hear? Whenever you think somebody's being too preachy in a book, sometimes you got to ask yourself, like, what is my resistance to what they're trying to teach?
Sometimes, yes.
I'm just like, I don't know.
Are you going to get into A Discovery of Witches, yes. Kristen? This was Kristen's pick.
Okay, this was so fun. This is by Deborah Harkness. I always want to say Harkness. Okay, so A Discovery of Witches was enhanced for me because before we started the book, we were at our sister Grace's house, and she had started watching the show with a friend. She said, let's just watch the pilot episode, and then we can decide if we want to read the book. The pilot episode was so great. Like, you're in an academic setting was it Harvard? I want to say Harvard.
No, it was at Oxford. Because you loved that she was in Europe.
Oh, yes. Yes. So she's in Oxford. Yeah, like I already forgot. And he's a vampire. She's a witch. They're enemies in this scenario. And I think it's the clothes. It, like, everything had a dark grain to it. And I was like, ooh, let's go. It's going to be spooky. It's going to be what I love. I read the whole trilogy back to back to back. And I watched all of season 1, and then I stopped, lost momentum in season 2. This is how I feel about that series. If you like time travel, if you like very historic fantasy, it's very historic driven and based. If you like a forbidden romance where they find each other in book 1, you're going to like this. I don't like that so much. It almost happened a little too soon for me. It was giving Outlander a little like they're together. So now what? But it was just a vibe. I'm a page to screen girly. That's why we have a Patreon where we do this every month. I love a great adaptation for a book. I think it makes both better for me. And either on their own, I don't know if they would stand perfect. They definitely would not be perfect to me. But together, what a vibe. What a cool experience.
And I think it was universally a good time for the club.
Yeah.
I had an okay time in book one, and I was enjoying it because the club was enjoying it. I watched part of the show. I think I DNF'd book two because the romance really stopped working for me.
Yeah, the romance
really
goes
stopped
downhill.
working. I think the book plays on the fact that he's a 500-year-old vampire who's a prude and a little bit archaic in his ideas about like the role of the man in the coupling.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like my way or the highway. He's very stubborn, and he's just
Book
he
two gives book
basically
two.
just
Okay.
he just basically withholds sex from her because of some like appreciation for her virtue or something, and she doesn't want it. So I mean I can appreciate a gentleman who's like, I'm willing to wait, as you know, out of respect for you,
But then he better ravage her.
It's not respectful because she doesn't feel respected by it. She feels like it's a power struggle and he has to win. And then, when we finally get to the freaking frackin' wedding night, I literally DNF'd at that part because it was so cringe to me. I could not. I was like, we read this whole book for a romance? Come on now.
Okay, so here's the thing is what helped me continue is I told myself this is not for the romance. I was there for like the side characters. There are great side characters for what's going on between like all of the different paranormal orders. That part is great throughout. But yes, the romance that I started reading for was not why I continued reading.
It was not giving.
But it reminds me of Outlander because like I
also
was in it
DNF'd
for the
that
romance.
series on the second book.
And then as soon as you're like, they're together and it's getting really weird and like, listen, I'm just going to find it a different story.
Yeah.
But both of them together, I mean, they would also be very fun in witchy season because they do give that vibe.
Yes.
Just to say.
Yes. I think it can be a vibey time to have with the group, especially if you're incorporating the show, which is why it's in our good time category. And then our last book in the good time category is Wool, the first book in the Silo trilogy by Hugh Howey. And fun fact, this story was indie published before it was traditionally picked up.
Was it?
Now it is an Apple TV sensation.
Yes.
And we love this story. We are loving the show. And
Dystopian will always have our hearts. Remember when we watched The 100?
Yes.
And like me and Maddie, before we were like reading as much as we read together, we always did a lot of shows. Like she would get into a show and then I would get into a show and vice versa.
So we could discuss.
Yes. And so I love that Wool is in this dystopian
situation.
Yes. That also is like, you have to keep reading to know what the fuck is going on.
It is one of those premises where it's like you're dropped in the middle of something and the premise is we don't know why we're here. We don't know who built the silo. We don't know why we live in a silo. We just know we can't go outside because we'll die. And that's all we know. So it's like you have to read to find out what's going to happen. I think that is the strongest part of the story. And I think the reason the show is so incredible is because where the books lacked for me was in character investment. I was so much more invested in what was going on than I was in any individual character. And I think the show really gets you invested in the characters.
Yes, they have an amazing cast. And it's so much easier in the show to get behind their motives because everybody is very, very invested in what they want to get done and you get behind it. I'm trying not to give spoilers, but because there's loss and because there's like history of lies and deceit, you just like, it's like this ball of yarn that you just keep unraveling. So I actually only read book one And I watched what was out. I have not continued watching what is out because I think I want to read the books first. But book 1 is actually like only the first half is like season 1. So you could probably read book 1 and watch seasons 1 and 2 is what I'm assuming. And it is just masterfully done. Like Maddie even said it herself. The pilot episode of that show is enough. I watched the episode first and then I was like, oh, I'm reading the book like right this minute.
I think it is one of the strongest pilot episodes I have ever seen. And I mean, I do think the first episode of A Game of Thrones is probably the top pilot episode I've ever seen.
Wild.
But I mean, Silo is, if it does not hook ya, I don't think we have similar taste.
Yeah, man. I want more of that. So I'm glad that I can finish that. And Magnolia Parks are 2 series that I will finish this year from.
I binged the whole thing. I had to know what was going to happen. And I am just now catching up on the show. And I do think the show is great. But I binged that trilogy. Like we read book 1 with the book club.
Yeah.
We all really enjoyed it. But I like immediately flew through books 2 and 3.
Will you do something for me and the people and just tell us, is the ending of the trilogy satisfying?
I was very satisfied with the ending, yes.
That's all I needed to know. Okay, well, we're ready to get into the top tier category, which is our best time.
These books were the best time for our book club.
And you've all probably heard about them already because if they're the best time, like we're going to make videos about them.
For sure. So we had been reading a lot of variety, as you are seeing. We had read some romance, we had read some self-help, some nonfiction. We'd read a lot of things. And I was like, it is time, club, for us to do an epic fantasy. We can do it. And Sarah was, of course, on board. So was Kristen. Was Emily on board for this? I cannot remember.
I don't even know if she was in the club at this time.
She did have a baby.
She might have been on leave still. All I remember is our sister Grace DNF.
Grace DNF this bitch. She was just like, I cannot do all the names. I'm not into the shield wall. So sorry. This is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, book 1 in the Bloodsworn saga. And Kristen and I gobbled this up and then read book 2. And then it was perfect timing because book 3 came out.
Every time we say gobble, I was think, gobble me, swallow me, drip down the side of me.
What is that?
Hose in this house. There's some hose. Anyways, that's what gobble always makes me up.
Wow. I was going to
I'll play it for you later. I'll play it for you after the podcast.
Going to take this in a Thanksgiving direction, but okay.
Oh, what? Okay, so Hunger of the Gods was incredible. I read it while we were in Ireland, and I will have this core memory for the rest of my life that I'm like in this beautiful like charter bus that is taking us through a national park in Ireland, and the hill, I mean, it was giving Lord of the Rings. There's sheep fucking everywhere. There's like water with giant mountains and mist over them. And I'm reading this epic story of the gods that have fallen and their offspring children. And it's like the most epic. Give it to me. It's been over a decade since I had read Lord of the Rings. And I was getting those feelings again of feeling like there's found families and there's troops and everybody's going to have the highest stakes imaginable chapter after chapter. So that was such a good choice, Maddie. I'm really glad that you brought that out because both Sarah and I have really continued with our high fantasy since then. Like it really gave us some momentum to start picking up some chunkier books that are going to have way less romance and are going to be more complex and have lots of characters and a big world. And you do have to like have your brain on reading these books. I will say sure. This is not like a let me just read it for the vibes. It is a vibe, but it is going to make you use your brain. And I appreciated it.
Yeah, I love the Bloodsworn saga. I read the Faithful and the Fallen series earlier in 2024, and it's one of my favorite series of all time. So I was very excited to read more from John Gwynne. I did not love the Bloodsworn saga as much as the Faithful and the Fallen, but I do find it to be a great entry point for people. The Faithful and the Fallen is like 7 or 8 points of view. I can't remember. But the Bloodsworn saga is only 3. And I think the stakes and motivations are much easier to grip off the bat. The magic system is more fleshed out and more integrated into the plot in the Bloodsworn saga. So if you are a fantasy reader who loves a really clear, concise magic system that actually has purpose in the plot, I think you're going to really like Bloodsworn saga.
Wait a second. So you're saying The Faithful and the Fallen is more complex?
The Faithful and the Fallen
the
is
Blood Sworn?
definitely more complex. There are more points of view, and it is more the Faithful and the Fallen is more political, and the Bloodsworn saga is more like personal, and your three characters are more on like personal quests, I would say, on the backdrop of kind of an epic conflict, whereas in The Faithful and the Fallen, it's very much like a chosen one epic. And it's very political and very military, and I absolutely love it. But the magic in The Faithful and the Fallen is kind of more like Lord of the Rings, where it's like there's magic present in this world, and there are like magical creatures that you wouldn't see in our histories. But it's not like there's not people like wielding magic or with magic ability like in the Bloodsworn saga.
I can't decide if this is a turn on or a turn off for me.
Kristen, you can absolutely handle it. When I say 7 or 8 points of view, it's like there's the brother and the sister in The Faithful and the Fallen, who are main character energy. Okay. There is a couple of villains, and then there
is... You get the POVs of villains?
Oh, yeah.
That's fun.
And then there is a kind of soldier from a different faction. You get his point of view, and his he's like the protector of another soldier. So you get that soldier's point of view, and you get another kind of smarmy uncle's point of view. Think Game of Thrones, where like you can keep up with them because they're all different. So like in Game of Thrones, you've got like Dany's point of view and Tyrion's point of view and Cersei's point of view, and you've got some Stark point of views, and you're like, don't think of it as like, oh my gosh, it's so many point of views. Think of it as like, okay, there's like a group in this place, a group in this place, and a group in this place. And I kind of want to know what the main characters in those places are thinking.
So I love this. You know what I've noticed in books is, because I'm a visual memorization person.
Yeah.
It is so much easier for me to tell in shows, because I'll be like, I don't know what the fuck his name is, even though I've seen him in 5 episodes, but I know where he lives. I know his hair color and his eye color. I know the tone of his voice. Like, it's so easy for me in shows. Like in Game of Thrones, God help me if I pick up those books. Thank God I watched the show, so I will hopefully be able to differentiate. Is that?
Yeah.
Differentiate. That's overwhelming, but I love John Gwynne's writing so much that it is a series that I want to read. I just am so intimidated.
I think you will love it better given the overlap in our taste.
Okay.
It does just feel more like the epics of our childhood. But we all did have a great time with Shadow of the Gods, except for Grace, who DNF'd it. And you know what?
We
bless
celebrate
her for that. We
yes.
bless her for knowing her own taste.
We love her journey. We love her journey. Okay. I'm so excited. I read my first ever Agatha Christie, and then there were none.
This was such a banger.
Bonkers fun. When I tell you, if I want to take down a book in a day and do a puzzle, this is the type of book I want.
It's like cozy thriller.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I don't know what it is about that taste that just feels like it's not a heist, but it gives heist, like something happened and we're going to like put the threads back together, and you're like making this tapestry and you feel so good when you're like, I solved it. I guessed that. Ooh, that got
I know what you're saying. It's not like a con, but the thing about like a con plot is that you've always got the strategist.
How's it going to come together?
The artist who's planned it all. And when you are in the middle of a mystery and you're looking for the murderer, it's like the murderer was the artist, like the mastermind. So you're like dropped into it trying to reverse engineer, like, how did they come up with this?
It scratches something in our brains that I think we've just always loved. We loved like Ocean's 11 growing up.
Oh,
we loved Knives Out. We loved Indiana Jones. Like, there's something about like
The Italian Job. I don't really know how Indiana Jones. Oh, you're saying because it's like a treasure hunt. I think we just love a mastermind.
I don't know. I think I just like ones where I'm like, I don't always know where it's going to go. And there's like some sort of ongoing mystery. Agatha Christie, man, she can get it.
She can get
I want to read
it.
more of her books. I'm like, maybe I just sprinkle in a couple a year, maybe just one a year. And it's just the gift I give to myself.
She's great. And I think I put that one forth because I had won it in a little book exchange.
At Fern and Fable, Sarah's bookstore.
Yes, at Sarah's bookstore. She did a little book exchange and everybody just like brought a book. And that's what I went home with. And I was like, oh, we're definitely reading this as a book club. And it was a banger.
It was a banger.
I highly recommend to any book club, honestly. I don't care what you read. People can get down with some Agatha Christie.
Oh, yeah. And she's a really great puzzle that Maddie did recently, which was very
Oh,
cool.
yes. I love
If you're a
Agatha
puzzler,
Christie
you could do an
puzzle.
Agatha Christie puzzle while you're listening to her book. I actually did really like listening to it, but in the beginning when there's like the info dump of like, what was it, like 11 characters or something, I did have to say, oh,
no, I definitely
Let me Google this
physically
real
read
quick.
that. I was like, I need to be able to keep all of this straight. Definitely
You have
read it
to.
with my eyeballs on paper.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 2 more for you.
oh.
We are so grateful to Sarah because she found us this book, which we never maybe would have found without her. And
Why not?
then we got to interview the author on this very podcast. So you can go check out that episode with Garreth Brown. But Sarah came to book club one day and was like, guys, I started this book this morning and I can't put it down. And so I think you guys should all read it with me.
Yeah, it's called The Book of Doors by Garreth Brown. It is a standalone. We love a good standalone because we've got so many series going. It had so many genres woven in that it's hard for me to tell you what the genre is.
Right.
There were moments that it was cozy.
Right. It's also an urban fantasy, but it's also
Terrifying.
a thriller,
Oh my God.
a mystery. It's kind of a literary fiction.
It's kind of romantic.
Kind of romantic.
I mean, there's romance in there.
It's definitely a love letter to readers. Obviously, it's called The Book of Doors, and it's about books and a hidden library.
Oh, yes. Oh my God.
But there's a sinister villain in this, like straight up fucked up sinister.
And when it's over, when the book is ended, okay, this is something Maddie and I love, is you can keep creating the future of the story in your brain. It would not surprise me if I had heard there's a second book because there was enough open to more. Like the world, it wasn't like, and it's all over now, perfectly tied up with a bow. I loved the ending.
Yeah.
It's satisfying, but the world feels so expansive and real that you're like, oh, somebody could create a universe. Like Garreth could just like go off in this universe of these like collecting books that have magical powers and the history. And oh, guys, without spoilers, if you ever read The Midnight Library, which I did a few years ago with the book club.
Is that by Matt Haig?
I want to say yes.
I did not read that one.
So I read that with a book club. It was not my choice. So again, you just try new things. And I liked it, but I feel like what it was missing that I couldn't have put words to, as soon as I read The Book of Doors, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
It's like the book to readers. Any book club, I think, could really enjoy The Book of Doors. It's so accessible. It's not really that long, but it's a page turner. Like there's always shit happening. No slow parts.
Oh, it's written very episodic. Like at the end of every chapter, something happens that makes you have to start the next chapter. And that is a gift Garreth has. Like it is just a talent he has to write that way that it hooks you, it pulls you in, it keeps you reading.
Yeah. And again, the interview is on our podcast. So Garreth Brown. It's really good. Okay, the best book I did not read with the book club because I read it earlier in the year. And then I just kept telling everybody to read this damn book. And they're like, oh, let's read it as a club. And it made me so happy because Maddie and I were saying before the podcast that if there was like one book that we could recommend to anyone and everyone, if they're like, what's one book that everybody should read? It would be Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl.
Literally, I cannot think of a single person, regardless of your worldview, your religious affiliation, your cultural background, your taste in books, who couldn't potentially benefit from this book. And it is so short and it is not manipulative. I think that I mean, it definitely comes from a point of view, obviously.
Yeah.
So I guess if you completely disagree with his point of view, then you won't like it. But basically, Viktor E. Frankl survived 4 concentration camps in World War II. He is a Jewish man. He is a psychologist, and he attributes his survival, obviously somewhat to luck, but also to his mindset and his practice of the theology or the philosophy that he was writing before he was imprisoned. And so in some ways, being in the concentration camps was the great experiment and the great test of his own philosophy and the work that he was writing. And he found it to be immensely helpful for him to mentally survive the atrocities of Auschwitz.
You know what this book it taught me a lot. But one of the things that has stuck with me today is that if I can get my mind in the right perspective, if I can just shift a little bit mentally, nothing else around me needs to change, how my entire world does change. Because if you can be in any situation, concentration camp, taking the kids to school and cleaning your house, whatever it is, your mind basically makes or breaks your life experience. So when he goes over his life in the concentration camps and you're sitting there like, holy shit, he's talking about the most heavy, hard, atrocious things, but somehow he's not coming off as a victim, the actual hell sauce. And then the end of the book is him literally just sharing his philosophies about the power that you have in your mind, and that there are ways that you can take control of a situation just by controlling your mentality in a situation is boggling. It's boggling.
And it isn't what I would consider the modern paradigm of like manifestation or positivity. Like, I don't think he's like, just get positive in your brain or just picture your best reality and go achieve it. That is not what he's saying. I think that his philosophy really boils down to, basically, he doesn't tout suffering as like, you should pursue suffering. You should pursue pain. He does not say that. He just says life includes suffering and pain.
Right.
And the way you approach suffering and pain and the way you endure suffering and pain matters.
Yes.
And it can have great purpose. And so it just gives context to the parts of your life that you don't have control over. And it does give you autonomy in those situations when you could feel like a victim because it feels like it's not in your control. He's just like, well, obviously I couldn't control the fact that I was in a concentration camp. Obviously not.
Yeah.
I did not choose it, would not choose it, do not recommend.
Or just even the fact that like a war was happening. It's like he was just busy doing his life's work and this war like got in the way, and then he literally got taken away from his work, and the way he missed his life's work and just couldn't wait to get back to it. Like, what a beautiful message about doing things in life that you care about and that you feel so deeply within your being that you're like, I have to make it through this season because I believe there is a season afterwards, and I'm going to live through this hard season to get there because it matters to me. Like, how lovely to hear about somebody who's not like, God, the world's just going to shit and like this war is forever and I'll never get a chance. Like, he believed that there was a life after, and he really attributes his ability to succeed through the challenges of the concentration camps due to his will to live. And golly.
Well, and just his not giving energy, feeling sorry for himself about the things that he could not change.
Yeah.
And instead channeling his energy into survival.
The appreciation you will have for the most
I'm just
basic
like,
things in your life.
How did he survive?
Yeah.
I mean, that level of malnourishment and cold and contact with sick people constantly for 4 years in a space that was like spiritually, energetically, and mentally deprived. Dead. Deprived of any life. How did he survive? And it is so inspiring. And
it's inspiring.
It will open your mind, I think. It did us. And so I think that was a big hit for our book club. I think it would be a big hit for anybody's book club. It is not light reading.
It's like Tuesdays with Morrie. You kind of have to go in with an expectation that it's going to create some conversations that are not like your basic, like, so how was this smut for you? Like,
but it is extremely accessible. Anyone can read it. And I think that it would impact absolutely anyone and everyone.
I feel like that's like a perfect way to end this podcast. Like, let's just talk about how book clubs can be, you know, your own little support group. It can be your own little place to talk about life and have creations and connections with other human beings. That's what I love about ours.
I love it too. I mean, I feel like art brings people together, and I think that stories are art, but I am so excited to have gotten to share these with you guys. Have you read any of these books? What are the best books you've read with a book club?
Yes.
We would love to hear if you want to tell us. And we're so excited for next week's episode, where we will be interviewing Carolyn Elliott on her book, Existential Kink. And we are going to get into it and go to those places, aren't we, Kristen? Are you going to be vulnerable?
Oh, yeah. I'm so ready to go there. If you guys want to join our book club over on Patreon, we are currently doing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and we're doing deep dives on that. And we're starting a Blake Crouch book next month, Wayward Pines. So sometimes book clubs can be local and sometimes they can't, but we're obviously huge fans of the book club community. So we do virtual and we do IRL.
Yeah, and if you do our virtual book club, it's a page to screen. So we do the book and the adaptation. So feel free to join us. All those links will be in our bio. We hope you guys have a great week. We hope you're reading something terrific. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.